Hey everyone, Amanda here from Eclectic Scribbles. I am back today with a brand new video, and this is a highly requested one, which is going to be a video on how to make mandalas. So that is what we're going to be doing today. I've pulled my collections journal out of my traveler's notebook setup, and we are going to set up some mandalas quickly in here, and I'm going to go over how I make mine. Alright, so first things first, I'm going to go over the supplies that I generally use for my mandalas. And they are very, very basic. I don't get too fancy with things. Any of this you can pick up from pretty much anywhere, and you could definitely pick up from your local craft store. So the first thing is a pencil and eraser is what you want to get your base laid down. And that way you can go back and erase it later. You also are going to probably want to have like a compass and protractor deal. This compass is by Maypad. They come in little kits. This has several of the tools that you're going to need in it. These things are usually found for like $4 or $5 all over the place. You can find them in office supply stores. You can find them at Walmart. You can find them at craft stores. You name it, they're pretty readily available, and you can always find them on Amazon if you don't have access to any of those stores. But in these sets, you're going to find something like a ruler, a protractor. You got your little triangles here. And generally speaking, there's like an extra pencil, some leads, an eraser, a sharpener, and then a compass with the little pencil lid in it, and then one that you can add your little pencil, pen, whatever you want into. So I have about 3 or 4 of these sets just laying around because I tend to lose the pieces to it. In here I've also stuck my little paper clip dealie, because my paper clip is the one that I use for my moxiedori stencil, which I'm going to show you here in just a second. So everything just sort of lays back in there and goes in there neatly. So I have these. I use the protractor here all the time. I use this little dealie from Westcott that is I picked up, I believe, at a Hobby Lobby over in the technical drawing section, and it's because it's the perfect size, really, for the ones that I do inside of my journal. So it's really easy to line it up and make the little marks where I need to, and then move it out of the way. Alright, so then we have stencils like this that you can get from people like Moxiedori over on Etsy, and this sort of acts as a do-it-yourself tool where you can do things quickly and easily. So say I want one with the start or the center right here. It has these little dots, and you sort of run it around in circles, and they are about 5 millimeters apart, so perfectly lined up to get you some nice circles here going from inside of a bullet journal. And then it also has these little marks about every 11.25, I believe, is what this measures out to be, which is how I like my stencils. So perfect for you to separate things into monthly mandalas, monthly trackers, things like that. So this will give you 32 sections on any mandala if you use every single one of the little marks here as guides for lines. So I will show you how to set up one using this, and then I will show you how to set up one using just your basic tools, which is what I use on the regular to set mine up. Alright, and I will tell you why, even though I had this stencil, I don't use it but on occasion and when I do use it. Alright, so first things first, let's run through how to use this stencil really, really quickly from moxiedori. I'm going to put a few mandalas like on this spread, so I'm just going to start one in one place and we'll go from there. So the basics you're going to want to lay down in pencil, and what you're going to do is take a paper clip or whatever. You can also use the little pointy deal here on your compass and just set it down wherever you would like the center of your mandala to be. And then with that, you are going to find the hole that you want to start with and just run it in circles all the way around. And then move on to the next hole and keep doing that all the way around until you have the template sort of rings laid out in the size that you want. So I'm going to lay down a few rings and I will be right back. Alright, so that is as big as you can get with these dots. That is each and every one of the dots here provided for you in the stencil. Now, I'm going to tell you what I like about this. Unless you're bumping off the side of the page like I did, it's pretty easy to use, and I really like this stencil. But if you want to go any bigger than this, you're going to need some help, because this is as far as it goes. So anything larger than this, if you want to just use like a piece of Bristol board or a piece of cardstock or something, and you want to create there. I mean, they do make a larger mandala stencil, but it's more expensive, and this one comes in handy only if you want to use it in your journal and do smaller mandalas. So I mean, it has its uses, and the larger one of course has its uses, but you can get most of this done using the protractor, and I actually find this a little bit easier than sticking the things in the little dots. But this is a great tool. The other thing that I'm not thrilled about with this is I would prefer that the little dots come all the way down or really close to your center dot so that you can run it around there too, because as it stands, this has quite a large gap in the middle of it. And you can use these and line up smaller holes, which is nice, and I understand that, but at the same time, there are no guides that you might find on, say, a stencil like this to show you that you are lining up the center points. So these can get you off really quickly, whereas if you line this up, you can see where you're at with these little lines showing you where the center points are. But these also, I believe, fall on like the 5mm increment, which is nice. You just have to be really careful. Like that one would go about there, and then based off of that, you would continue to go around and make your little circles. But you don't have to do that with a compass, which is why I sort of use those. All right, the really beneficial thing is this is divided up to provide you with 32 sections, and that is the way I really like my mandalas laid out. It's a nice even number. It's perfect for doing monthly trackers and things like that, and so that I find really helpful. And even though I don't use the little dots, I do tend to come in, lay this down on top of my mandalas when I'm in a rush, and just use the guides here to make my little marks. And so you go through, you make all the little marks that you want, and you can use as many or as few of these little marks as you like. So I'm going to use each of them. Alright, and then you go in with your ruler, and instead of digging that one back out, I'm just going to use one that I've got sitting over here. And then you just connect the lines. You're going to go around the entire template and do that. So I'm going to do that and be right back. Alright, so this is what you're going to look like all laid out. I also want to mention that this has a flat edge on the side of it so that you can use that edge as a way to connect the lines, but I find that sometimes it's not long enough, so rather than switch back and forth between tools, I like to go ahead and just use one of my rulers. And depending upon the size of the mandala I'm making, that also just comes in handy, because sometimes I use the little 6-inch ruler, sometimes I use the 12-inch ruler. But that is how you're going to set up the base of your mandala over with like a stencil, something like that from Moxiedori. Now I'm going to also jump over here and I'm going to show you how I would set up my mandala using just a compass, your basic tools. Alright, so you're going to slide your pencil, pen, whatever you're using in here and just line it up. Tighten it down, and then you're going to choose your starting point. I'm going to say that this looks pretty close to center, and I'm just going to sort of go from there, and then wherever I want to start is where I start. And so the beauty of doing it with a compass is the fact that I can start right here really close to the center point, and then you just, of course, if I'm not talking and I'm actually paying attention, I'll hold it steady. Alright, so you're just gonna twirl it around in circles, and then the way that I use mine is that I like to keep it on the 5mm dot grid as well. So I just sort of come out to one of the sides, find the next dot, make sure my pencil is lined up with it, and then go from there. Your circles don't have to be 5mm apart. You can make them evenly spaced. You can unevenly space them. You can do whatever you want to with them. You can make them smaller, say about every 2.5mm if you want to try and fit something like a mood mandala on the page or something like that. But then you just make your circles until you are happy with the size of your mandala. Now I'm going to go pretty far out as far as the edge of the page is concerned, so you can see that this is a little bit easier for me to do. There's not a whole lot of fuss. I don't have to hold a paper clip in one hand and a pencil in the other hand, and if I go a little bit faster, you know, this works out easier for me. Like I said, I like the Moxiedori stencil. I really do, especially with the little divisions, but depending upon how thick your pencil lead is. And this is a 0.3mm pencil. This is a really light pencil so that the lines don't show up and they're easy to erase. Sometimes the little gap can cause you to get off slightly and can give you sort of a very minimal, but if you're a little OCD like me, still noticeable difference in some of your lines. So I also, if I'm doing these things in my journal, try to make sure that my center point is always on one of the dots so that I can go back and I can find it. That puts the vertical and horizontal axes on a line as well, and so when I'm going to divide them up myself, it's really easy to do. So that is it done with the stencil and me talking to you real quick. So there's not a whole lot of thought involved, or not the stencil, with the compass. And then I go ahead and mark off my center lines vertically and horizontally. So this is me doing it with no stencil at all. And I'm going to try to explain how to do this in the simplest way possible. So if you start here, these are 4 90-degree sections. So we're going to do a little bit of math here. So the next thing that you want to do is go in at 45 degrees to split these sections in half also. Well, luckily the dots sort of line up here in a fashion that is also going to make this helpful. So you're going to have diagonal dots that will run you on the 45. And a good rule of thumb is no matter what 2 points you have, like if you're using the stencil, if you make sure that you are running your line through the center dot, you're going to be fairly accurate as far as the spacing is concerned. So that is pretty much done for you. Now we need each of these sections split up again, which is going to be at 22 and a half degrees is half of your 45 degree mark. So something like this is easy to find on this type of ruler. You're at 10, 20, 1, 2, and right there in the middle. We're going to go 10, 20, 1, 2, sort of right there in the middle, and just keep doing that all the way around. 10, 20, 1, 2, right there in the middle. So if you split them in halves like this, it's going to be a little bit easier to find than going, okay, well, we're going to start at 22 and a half degrees and then we're going to go to 45 degrees. So if that makes sense. So like I said, the stencil actually comes in pretty handy where that is concerned. But at the same time, I am so used to doing these that it's also kind of become sort of second nature. So as long as you have whatever number you want, you just take 360 and divide it up by the number of sections you want, and that will give you the degrees that you need to separate each of your sections by. So yeah, a little bit of math will help you out here, just getting everything lined up and right, but you're not going to be too far off. And then you can always freehand mandalas. I don't like them because freehand for me, because I'm a little way too OCD about it to be able to do that. But I like every single one of them to be as closely matched up as possible. So we're only going to do 16 divisions in this one, so this one is about half of this. And if you wanted to go in here and do 11.25 degrees and separate these into little sections as well, you are more than welcome to. You can do it in 36. You can do every 10 degrees and mark that off using the compass. So the options are a little bit more varied when you're just using a compass rather than using a stencil. So you can go in here and mark off every 10 degrees, and then you've got 36 sections to go by when it's all said and done. But I tend to like either the 16 or the 32. All right, but that is all it is to set up your actual base for the mandalas. And so next, you just need pens. You need whatever pen you want to use to create your mandala. I like using black. I like using my microns for this. I also like the Tombow Mono drawing pens for this. I've lost my 01 in these Tombows, though I had the 05 and the 03. There are a lot more sizes in the micron, and they're my go-to pen, but that is just personal preference. You can also use any kind of pen that you want. These are the Staedtler fine liners. If you want yours to be in color, these are perfect. You know, whatever fine liner you have laying around. If all you have laying around is a ballpoint, use a ballpoint. So now we're just basically going to get started in building the actual design of the mandala, which is the fun part. So I'm going to get my 02 which is not too bold of a line, not too thin of a line. It's somewhere in the middle. I'm going to get that out here, and then we're just going to start making shapes, and the trick to this is just to repeat it all the way around. So let's start up here with this one. One of the easiest shapes to do is sort of just like a flower petal. So you've made the first one, it's just a little flower petal shape. You're going to repeat that all the way around. So I'm going to do that and be right back. Alright, so there's our little flower petal all the way around, and you just want to make them all sort of look as similar as possible. So if it went up and hit this next line, then you just want to do that all the way around. If it took up one of these little boxes that you've laid out, then that's how you want all of them to look. Now you can also sort of spread this over more than one box, just so long as you can do it all the way around. That is sort of the trick. You can also make these as detailed or as simple as you want. So this would be my first little layer. For something like this that had a hole in the middle, I would definitely do the center in ink as well, just to give it a nice little starting point. And I'm going to see if I have a stencil that'll line it up, but you can also sort of do it freehand, because I don't think any one of these are going to fit perfectly. You can always go back in here. This one's close enough. You can always go back in and use your moxiedori stencil as well. That one was pretty close. So, and instead of using your pencil, you would just go in to this first line and go back around and pin. But I just find that a little bit easier. So now you've got the inside started. You could write a fun word in here, something like that, just to leave the middle open. Alright, another common shape is sort of like a Hershey Kiss. And so just basically come in, fan out just a little. Now this one is sort of going to go over two boxes and be separated by one of the lines. So you're going to skip the little next box. And I tend to make these shapes half of the shape at a time. So I'll go around and do all of the right sides for this shape. And the more you do them, the more they just sort of become muscle memory. And you're just steady rotating your paper so that when you make the shape, you're always sort of making the same motion with your hands. Okay, and then all of the right sides of these shapes are made. And then depending upon how it's easier for you to draw, you can start from the bottom up. So I find sometimes coming from the other way, if I go from the bottom up, I can do it a little bit better than, say, if I come from the top down going in the opposite direction, but it's still just as easy for most people to do. I just find it a little bit easier for myself because it's almost like you're making the same motion as before instead of doing the opposite. So go in either way you want. Do it from the bottom up, do it from the top to the bottom like you did the right on the left, and go all the way around. You're just going to keep filling this up with more and more shapes. So let me get a spare piece of paper here, and let's just go over some common shapes that you can make. So we've already went over sort of like the flower petal look. We've got this Hershey Kiss look. You could do sort of a leaf shape. The possibilities are endless. You can do just like a basic triangle, whatever you like. And then you can go in and decorate each one, and that's where the design really comes and looks a lot more detailed. So if you start going in and adding those little bits of details to each one of the little shapes. It's where the design really starts to pop and really starts to come together. And whatever design sort of pops into your head is perfectly fine to go with. I mean, the whole idea is you're just really making it pretty after that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use some of these shapes, and I'm going to show you how I would fill out a mandala. And I will be right back. Alright, so now I've got a couple of more little design elements in here, and it's a perfect time to show you what happens and what I do to sort of fix mistakes, because right over here you can see where I miscalculated a little bit, and so the line doesn't really line up where it goes. It's a whole step above where it should be. So I like to use a white gel pen of some sort so that I can just go in there and make that line less visible. And sometimes you can go in there once and cover it up pretty well. Sometimes it takes a couple of little coats, but that gets rid of the line for the most part. And then when it dries, it's pretty much gone. So that is how I would fix something like that. And I'm also not a patient person, so I went in way before that thing ever dried. But then give it a minute so that it can dry before you go dragging your hand through it. You could be a little bit more patient than I am. Alright, so this is a really simple mandala. This has none of the decoration that I was speaking of in each of the little shapes, but now we filled out all of the different rings that we set up with the moxiedori stencil. So you can stop there, or you can go in and then detail out each one of these little shapes so that it really packs a bit of a punch. You can also, to give it a little bit more emphasis without putting little designs in each one of the shapes, you can always vary your line weight as you go, or you can thicken up lines when you're done. So for example, like the ones that I've drawn the circles in, I would probably go in and do something like thicken up those lines, and I would do that with like an 05 micron, an 05 mono drawing pen, or even an 08, something with a much thicker tip on it so that it just gives it a little extra something and makes that line just a little bit bolder. So see, thickening up that line is just a subtle way to give it a little bit of a pop and stand out amongst the other lines. But that's something really simple that you can do if you just vary the line weights throughout the design. And like I said, you can do this as you go, or if you don't really have a plan going in, you can always come back and do it later. My desk is just really not built for mandalas over here. This is where I do these. Just thicken up the lines as you go, or come back in and thicken them up later, and that just gives a little bit of pop. And again, you can put your Staedtlers, your microns, your Tombow mono drawing pens, any whatever you're using. You can put these back in your stencil, you can put them in your compass and go over these lines a little bit more precisely, or you could just come in here and sort of freehand it and thicken them up. So that just helps those two lines sort of stand out amongst the others. And then I may go in here with, say, my 01 and just give something else a little detail. So how about we make these look a little like leaves. Whatever you do to one going around, you just want to repeat the process and do to the rest until you get back to the start. Alright, now you can choose to leave that the way it is, or you could do both sides. I like to leave it as one side. Alright, so I'm going to go in here and add a little decoration to each one of the little shapes, and I will let you watch me do that, and then I will be back in just a minute. Alright, so I'm thinking that this one is going to be done for now. It's a little sloppy. I sort of rushed through it a little bit, which is something that I don't do on a regular basis, but is very aware of the fact that there's a camera on me right now. So that tends to rush me a little bit more than doing it off camera would. But you can see that from where we started, this is a lot more detailed, even with very, very simple things done to it, like filling in every other one of these with a little dark circle, or thickening up lines here, adding little hearts, little dots to the edges of the swirls, and other little things in each one of the elements. So like I said, this can get as detailed and as complex as you would want it to. Like this one over here, you would do the exact same thing, except for we've got it coming all the way down into the center here, so there's no opening in the middle. I will also show you one that I was working on that I haven't quite finished yet, but we're going to go with this one. So this is a bunch of little mandalas in a larger mandala, and then it's sort of boxed off with this like diamond shape. So if you really take your time in doing some of these, they can look really nice and really intricate. I really, really like this design. I think it needs a little bit of something here, and I may or may not add something around the edges. I haven't decided yet, but this is one that I had started and was working on. I think that's the only other one. Oh, I have another one over here from a couple of months ago. So each and every one of them, depending upon what you can do, what you decide to do, is going to look a little bit different. So this is a little bit more open, a little bit more, it's just a little different. So yeah, no two are ever going to be the same unless you try to make them the same. You just go with whatever you're feeling at the moment, make whatever shape that you want, and then just repeat it around. So You can put little mandalas inside of big mandalas. You can put them out on the edges. I mean, so the possibilities with these things are absolutely limitless. But for something this size, this is especially what I'm talking about when I say I use my compass instead of the moxiedori stencil, because it is not going to reach that far. Now, the bigger one, I'm pretty sure will reach this, but this compass will reach further than this paper will. So you can go with whatever size you want with a compass, and it's just as easy as using something like a stencil. Like I said, this really comes in handy if you want the pre-cut things, but it also becomes second nature to use your protractor as well. And depending upon how many different sections you want and how you want to split your mandala up, this may not work for you. Like, this goes every 11.25 degrees, like I sort of mentioned before. But if you wanted to go every 10 degrees and have 36 different sections, you could not use this kind of stencil for that. You would have to go in and mark it with a protractor anyways. So that's why I sort of default back to your basic tools. But like I said, this is how you would start a mandala. This is how you would make a mandala. You can see that I've messed it up here as well, so I've sort of gone over that with my white pen. You need to be careful of smearing, especially with some of your broader tip pens that take a little bit longer to dry. So you can also, in this one, I went sort of layer by layer, and I worked my way to the outside. But for something this size, it's something bigger, I tend to do section by section. So I would do this whole little mandala and then move on and then move on. Once I figure out, say, in one little section, like pie section of this mandala, what I want it to look like, I'll pencil that in really, really lightly, which you can also do, that I didn't do here. But pencil in the design you want really, really lightly, and then just go in and duplicate it over and over and over again as well. So that is always an option. That way you can really be sure of what you're doing before you commit to ink. And that's how I do these bigger, fancier ones, that I don't feel overly concerned with the ones that I do in my journal this way. And I don't mind committing to pen right off the bat, because these are more just for me and just for fun, just something to sort of doodle out and practice. But the larger ones, I definitely go in and do the design part and pencil first. And then you would just, as soon as this is dry, you would go in, erase your pencil marks like they were never there. And then you're just left with your mandala. Now, some markers and pens will be a little bit more forgiving as far as the inks are concerned, and then some will smear and fade depending upon how roughly you go over it with your eraser. Microns, Tombos, and things like that, you're not going to really run into any problems as far as your ink lightening up or erasing any of your pen or it's smearing on you. So then you are left with your mandala. That is all that is left here on this side anyway, for the most part. If I could erase it all, that would be lovely, but again, I'm rushing. And then you would either go in and write a quote or start a new one altogether and sort of line it up behind this one. So I think that's what I'm going to do for this spread, is I'm just going to line up a whole bunch of different ones and sort of layer them in there, and in different sizes as well. So I will probably post the end result of this page over on my Instagram when it is finished. But that is going to wrap up the video and me walking you through how I make mandalas for today's video. So if you have any other questions about how to make mandalas, or if there's anything that I didn't cover in this video that you would like to know, or anything that you are still unclear on, let me know down in the comments below. I happily answer each and every one of your questions. I will see you all again Friday. Friday is the Plan With Me video for the month of May. I still have not decided on my May theme yet, so if you have a good one, drop those down in the comments as well. I'm trying to steer clear of Mayflowers, even though somehow I keep coming back to it. So yes, definitely, if you have a theme idea, drop it in the comments. All right, so I will see you all again then. I see you every day in the vlog, and I will be finishing that up later today as well. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a big thumbs up if you found it at all helpful. If you didn't find it helpful and feel a need to give it a thumbs down, let me know in the comments below why, so I can improve the channel for you. And until next time, everyone, happy journaling. Bye.